The Supreme Court case Schenk versus United States came to a close today, with the court deciding unanimously that Charles Schenk was guilty under the Espionage Act of 1917. Also established was what will be known as the clear and present danger test to determine which speech is not protected by the First Amendment. For more details, we go to Mick Mack with the story.
This is Mick Mack with Channel 13 News Syracuse. Schenk was convicted today under the Espionage Act of 1917 for speech that would obstruct the recruitment and enlistment services of the United States of America. He was also convicted for distributing that speech using the postal services of the United States. The Espionage Act was passed on June 15, 1917, after Woodrow Wilson declared war with Germany and its allies. Title I, Section 3, made it a crime to make or convey false reports or false statements with attempt to interfere with the operations or success of the military or naval forces of the United States. It also made it a crime to cause or attempt to cause insubordination, disloyalty, mutiny, or refusal of duty in the military or naval forces, or to willfully obstruct the recruitment and enlistment services of the United States. This act was punishable by up to 20 years in prison and $10,000 worth of fines. Title 12 of the Act granted power to the postmaster to refuse to mail any materials that violated the Espionage Act or advocated treason, insurrection, or forcible resistance to any act of the United States. Charles Schenk was the secretary of the Socialist Party, and he was arrested for distributing pamphlets to draftees that protested war efforts. These pamphlets contained messages such as "Do not submit to intimidation" and "Assert your rights, your opposition to the draft." The documents claim that the draft was a direct violation of the 13th Amendment, which outlawed slavery and unlawful servitude. The Supreme Court claimed that these pamphlets were intended to weaken the loyalty of soldiers and obstruct military recruitment.
No war! Ultimate intimidation! Peace! Woodrow Wilson sucks. Yeah!
Good morning. Today we're going to be joined in the studio by Charles Schenk, who was recently convicted under the Espionage Act for distributing pamphlets that protested the war draft. Charles? Thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
My pleasure. I'm doing well.
So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the outcome of Schenk versus the United States. It's been a major court case, and we really want to get your perspective on this. What was your goal in distributing these anti-war pamphlets?
Well, my goal was I wanted to inform drafted men about how they should stand for their rights, and these thousands of men that got drafted and are going to war is a violation of our 13th Amendment and is unlawful servitude.
And how do you feel about the outcome of this ruling?
It's completely unconstitutional. I'm very against it. It's not what our founding fathers had in mind when they wrote our Constitution.
And do you think your role as secretary in the Socialist Party had anything to do with the decision and what was decided?
Absolutely, absolutely. This country is afraid of socialists and is ruled by the fat cat capitalists on Wall Street, and they're clearly influencing the Supreme Court and decisions in the Supreme Court like mine. And people are afraid of my point of view, what I believe in, and they want to silence me even though I went by the Constitution and did nothing wrong.
I mean, you're going to jail for 6 months. Has the outcome of this case made you think twice about your political advocacy?
No, absolutely not. No one can ever silence me. If I don't stop saying it for our rights, who will?
So 6 months from now, you're going to be a free man. You're going to be back out on the streets. Are you going to be right back to what you were doing before?
Yes, I absolutely plan to continue.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Charles. It's been a
for having
pleasure
me.
meeting with you, and good luck.
Thank you.
Mr. Gibbons, I need to talk to you. I'm Mick Mack with Channel 13 News Syracuse. Your client's going to jail for 6 months. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel it is failure in our judicial system. I feel establishing the clear and present danger was not appropriate for this case. I feel like it really did not apply.
And can you please explain a little bit about the outcome and what it means for people in the United States right now?
Well, it means we are not allowed to speak against our country in the wartime. My client supports socialism, and he does not think people should go to the draft if they do not feel like going to war, because maybe they support the opposition, but they cannot speak for that.
And what was the president before this?
Well, it was a bad tendency test, and it established a new test. I think the bad tendency test was fine. Was there really any bad tendency test with sending a letter saying, "Oh, you should not go to the draft. You should stand up for your rights"? There is no bad tendency in that. But the court had to establish a new test called clear and present danger, with apparently has compelling state interest to stop speech during times of war. And it redefined what free speech is, and it limits free speech, and we should not limit free speech.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
No problem.
Confirming the Supreme Court's decision, Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said that Schenk's speech had a bad tendency and posed a clear and present danger to the nation. Under the new clear and present danger standard, certain types of speech are decided to be or not to be protected under the First Amendment. Holmes further likened using anti-war speech and protesting the government during wartime to shouting fire in a crowded theater. In other words, I can't do this. Fire!
Extra, extra, read all about it. Schenk versus United States. Supreme Court finally decides. This ruling poses the question of where we will be drawing the line between our personal liberties and wartime protection, though only the future will tell us what the impacts will ultimately be. For Channel 13 News, this is Ralph Wilmer. Good night.